Good evening everyone and welcome to the Council meeting Tuesday 4th of June 2019 at Lakes Entrance, our second Council meeting outside the Bairnsdale Corporate Centre, and it's great to have so many people here tonight. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting to enhance the accessibility of its meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are also archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the meeting, any members of the gallery who are addressing the Council will have their image, comments or submissions recorded. Please ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off or in silent mode for the duration of the meeting. On behalf of Council, I would like to acknowledge the Gunai-Kurnai people, the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered, and pay our respects to their elders both past and present. 1.2, apologies, Mr CEO.
Madam Mayor, I have one apology from Councillor Reeves and Councillor Jackson is running late.
Item 1.3, declaration of conflict of interest.
Madam Mayor, I only have one for yourself at item 5.2.1.
Thank you. Item 4.1, confirmation of minutes, that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on Tuesday 7th of May 2019 be confirmed. Thanks, Councillor Peltz.
Happy to move that.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. All those in favour? It's carried. 1.5, next meeting will be an ordinary council meeting Tuesday 25th of June 2019 to be held at the Corporate Centre in Bairnsdale commencing at 1 p.m. Item 1.6, requests for leave of absence.
Madam Mayor, none have been received at this point.
Thank you. Item 1.7, which is a request to speak about your community project. We have two this evening. The first is Lakes Entrance Action and Development Association from Mr. Bruce Hurley, and we look forward to hearing your presentation, and there's just a timer there to let you know that you've got 15 minutes, and we'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie, and welcome all to Lakes Entrance. As Natalie says, I'm Bruce Hurley and I'm the President of the Lakes Entrance Action and Development Association, and appreciate the chance to present to you tonight and talk a little bit about LEADER and also the infrastructure priorities that LEADER sees for Lakes Entrance. I guess to start on an optimistic note, things are beginning to happen in Lakes Entrance. LEADER looks forward to working constructively with the Shire on the backlog of infrastructure developments. There's some optimism in the town that the corner is being turned and Lakes Entrance is moving forward again. During the last 2 years, LEADER has welcomed the opportunity to present to the Shire and Vic Roads and to have constructive relationships with our state and federal members. Information has flowed more freely from the Shire since the appointment of the new CEO. Recently, Vic Roads has regularly sought the views of LEADER and consulted with LEADER. LEADER is determined, as is the Lakes Entrance community, to work together to rejuvenate Lakes Entrance. To achieve this, we need the support of all tiers of government, including local government, and to attract new private investments. But first, a little about what caused the largest town meeting in Lakes Entrance history last month. Many in the community were feeling that despite its idyllic setting, Lakes Entrance was languishing. Little or no growth in population or tourist numbers, retail outlets vacant, key sites along the Esplanade vacant and an eyesore. CBD footpaths in disrepair, reports saying the town looked tired and in need of improvements. Perhaps just to illustrate just one aspect of that visually, I'll whip through these next 2 or 3 slides, but it's the CBD, the main footpath in Lakes Entrance. So it's not a particularly good look for the top tourist or the top holiday spot in East Gippsland. People felt the town was not getting its share of infrastructure development by all levels of government, nor attracting private investment. This was all first highlighted in a town meeting in November 2014, chaired and facilitated by Councillor Dick Ellis. Last year, after the number of vacant retail sites in the CBD had risen to over 27 at the last count, Darren Chester called a meeting to discuss what could be done. Attending the meeting also were Tim Bowl, the Mayor at the time, Joe Rettino, business and community leaders. So perhaps just also a quick visual look at what people will know. Those at the Chester meeting agreed there were many reasons why the town was not flourishing, including too far from population centres, lack of support from the Shire, internet shopping, threat of rising sea levels, Bruthen bypass, businesses looking tired, run-down infrastructure, just to name a few. There was also agreement that the town needed a strong, united voice, as it was felt that there had been a lack of an effective lobbying voice for Lakes Entrance. And so this is one thing that the town had control over. So Leader sought new members willing to be on the committee to lead a new direction and to revitalise Leader. A new committee of Leader was established in late February and set out to establish a strong voice for Lakes Entrance that would advocate for a much needed facelift to the town. So there's the new committee, 7 of them, just moving around from left to right, Ted Hare, Lauren Barlow, John Butler Cole, Mike Anketel, Jeff Wilson, Sarah Carlisle and Alison Brewer. Missing from that is myself, I was taking the photograph, and Peter Sindri, who's in the second row over on the right, is the 9th committee member. So 7 of the 9 of the committee were new members to Leader and also new on the committee. The new committee's initial goals were to increase its membership, listen to the priorities of the community, and establish constructive, forward-looking relationships with all tiers of government and relevant government authorities. Leader believes these goals have been met, illustrated by an increase in membership from 40 to over 430, frequent communication with the community via the press, letter drops and a monthly newsletter, and in addition, regular meetings with the Shire, Darren Chester and Vic Rhodes, and the communication with other government authorities are now well established. Back to the town meeting, called last month. 320 people attended because of their concern for the town and because the meeting had been promoted as forward-looking, not just a whinge session. Residents want to work together with the Shire, other tiers of government and private investors to get lakes on the move again. So where to from here? First, Leader believes it can now speak on behalf of Lakes Entrance businesses and residents of the town. It has a large, broadly based membership with a committee elected by its members. As such, we believe it is now appropriate that Leader be invited to take part in formal discussions, particularly on those matters listed by Leader as priority new infrastructure developments. Leader also believes we should have access to relevant documentation that address these development priorities. Put simply, the community wants its voice heard and wants to influence its future. Secondly, Leader wishes and intends to help set the agenda for current and future infrastructure developments by drawing upon the feedback received by the businesses and residential community. In doing so, Leader has noted questions and discussions at the town meeting, analysed the surveys circulated at the town meeting and made available online, and viewed comments and suggestions made via emails and membership application forms. From this process, Leader has set infrastructure development priorities. There were no surprises here, as in the main, these priorities agreed with the list established at and after the 2014 town meeting. First, a comment on Jimmy's point, look out before listing the priorities. The development of the new Jimmy's Point viewing platform to replace the existing viewing platform has already received funding and a timetable, so it's pleased to see this project materialise. For this reason, the viewing platform is not included in the priority list. In saying that, Leader notes that there is still work to be achieved with the viewing platform concept, including the development of plans for both the existing lookout site and Rotary Park. Leader understands that this work is underway and requests that a Leader representative be invited to join the group responsible for the design and implementation of this iconic structure. Leader believes, as per other projects, that it needs to be consulted at the beginning of the design process and not after key design decisions have been formulated or made. So now returning to the priorities. Priority number 1, and these all are no surprises, improvement and development on Bullock Island. Priority number 2, improvement and development on the foreshore and esplanade and related projects such as the town square, the slipway and the spit. Priority number 3, improvement and development on walking trails and the constructive use of 55 Palmers Road. That's being used well tonight. Priority number 4, improvements and development on further work at Rotary Park, indoor recreational facilities, landscaping along Marine Parade, upgrading of Mechanics Hall, possibly as into an arts hub, expansion of the industrial area, improved dog off-leash arrangements. In setting these priorities, Leader is not suggesting that tasks be individually developed in the numeric order described above. For instance, some items with a lower priority may be able to be addressed earlier at times when finances and resources become available. So just briefly on those top priorities. Priority 1, Bullock Island. The neglect of this popular prime recreational site needs to end. From all surveys and feedbacks received by Leader, the community is saying that Bullock Island clearly stands out as a prime location in need of urgent attention. As such, Leader considers this together with the esplanade and foreshore to be the town's top priority. The potential for Bullock Island to be optimised for tourists and the community is self-evident, with its excellent water views, marine life and waterways with boating activity and the frequent movement of seals and dolphins, is already a favourite fishing and crabbing spot for visitors. I mean, just looking at the slide up there, it was interesting, the one on the left that was taken 3 years ago when 3 prominent citizens were looking at the potholes in the road going over to Bullock Island. The jetty, as you can see in this one, as most people would know, it's a very it's a popular fishing and crabbing spot. The island holds great potential to create exceptional walks and bike rides, as well as plenty of space for passive recreation. Not yet fully exploited is the opportunity to see the fishing industry in action, and I know you met with the fishing co-op this morning. Buy fish off the trailers, have a seafood restaurant and establish a marine education facility. At holiday times, there are frequently more than 100 people on the southwest corner of Bullock Island, despite the potholed gravel road, lack of toilets and the appearance of a dump site. Bullock Island has been the focus of many studies over the last 30 years, all of which recognise this great potential that the island has as a tourist destination and a place for recreation for residents. All of these studies detail courses of action for its development. The last concept master plan for Bullock Island, the 2015 Rotary Lakes Entrance Interpretive Study, 2012 Lakes Entrance Foreshore Management Plan, the 2007 Urban Design Framework, the 1997 Lakes Entrance Foreshore Plan, and during the 90s the Gondwanaland Project and the 1987 Lakes Entrance Foreshore Strategy. Leader understands that in the past, improvements to Bullock Island have been deferred because of complex issues associated with the responsibility and funding of elements of the island. Leader understands that overall agreements have now been reached whereby the Shire will have overall responsibility for the management of the island, with other authorities having specific responsibilities, in particular dealt with the responsibility for the seawall's repair and maintenance. Leader is concerned that there is no budget allocation for Bullock Island development in the Shire's draft budget, despite aspects of the development being low cost and a high priority. A framework for the island's development is an immediate and urgent requirement. Leader suggests the 2015 Master Plan for Bullock Island, which was endorsed by the Council, is an excellent starting point and should be updated, taking into account the new management responsibilities, state funding available for the seafood restaurant, Gippsland Port's commitment to expand the jetty and fishing co-op plans. In our budget submission, we've put that there needs to be budget allocations for Bullock Island in the coming years, and we've made suggestions in terms of those budget allocations. They're just indicative amounts. Priority 2, the CBD, comprising the foreshore and esplanade and the following projects: the town square, the slipway and the spit. The Shire's 2016 CBD Improvement Plan talks about the history of ad hoc developments, the lack of aesthetic appeal in the CBD, and how the community sees the town as tired and second rate and need to restore a sense of pride. There is a clear need to improve the CBD and foreshore and make it more people friendly with improved walk, bikeways and footpaths, informal recreation and meeting places, continuous shade and avenue trees, quality street furniture, better signage, improved pedestrian crossings and lighting and public art. The CBD improvement, I'll skip that bit. Leader acknowledges that some works are now underway with funding from Vic Roads and the Shire. However, despite repeated requests, we have been unable to acquire planning documentation, for instance, that shows the precise extent and scheduling of the works. A bit of short of time, I've got a long list of things that we've requested, so I'll skip those, but they'll be available in the written report. Leader has developed detailed ideas for the slipway, town square and the foreshore and esplanade, and we want the opportunity to discuss these. Leader notes that there will likely be many more elements in the CBD development. We acknowledge that work of this complexity involving so many elements will need to be closely coordinated. For this reason, we seek to have Leader included in the implementation team. As stated earlier, Leader can now rightly claim its place at the table as the representatives of the local community. There are, of course, a range of meetings of detailed technical nature that Leader's involvement would not be required. I'll just say the headings and leave it at that. The priority 3, improvement to walking trails and a constructive use of 55 Palmers Road. I guess I'll just read out a couple of recommendations there. The walking trails, in particular the 4 circuit walks, the Esplanade, Marine Parade, the Entrance Circuit Walk, Jemmy's Point Lookout Circuit Walk and Eastern Beach Circuit Walk. Leader has been highlighting the need for improvements to these 4 circuit walks to the Shire for 2 years. Commitments have been made to improve maintenance and signage as well as doing an audit of the walks. These commitments as yet have not been met. Last slide. And 55 Palmers Road, I'm sure people have got a little bit of the history of 55 Palmers Road. We've got a little bit about private investment, which I'll skip over. And then just finally, Leader will continue to update this paper between our regular meetings with the CEO and Mayor of the Shire so as to help inform discussions at these meetings. A more detailed paper will be forwarded to the CEO and Mayor to form the basis of discussion prior to our next meeting on the 21st of June. So thanks very much for your attention. My apologies for going over a couple of minutes, and certainly I'd welcome if there are any questions from councillors. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mr. Hurley. We appreciate you taking the time to present on your new association, and congratulations on building it up to where it is today. Thank you. Councillor Peltz.
Thank you. Bruce, with regards to what you've got listed there, are we getting a copy? Will we receive a copy of that so that we can put it in through our community section and have some kind of idea on what direction you want to go and with your group?
I think, am I on? No. Yes. Yes. I'll send. We've got two versions of this paper. I can send them both through. But that was I read from the shortened version, and then there's a longer version that goes into more detail, some of our thoughts about each of the projects. Stefan? Give you the long version. I'll send both versions through to Anthony and then to distribute how they seem fit.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say well done on your presentation, and that a point you made earlier, I think that has merit, is that you, and I agree with it, that consultation needs to come before the planning stage with the community. I think that's a very good way to provide the community with what they really want. So I'd say well done.
No other questions? Councillor Peltz.
Just a curious statement which Bruce made was the fact that he believed that council was going to be in control of Bullock Island, and I'd just like that clarified clearly at this point from our staff members as to what that is going to be.
Council has commenced discussions with the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning about the future management of Bullock Island, or the balance areas of Bullock Island, but that is subject to council determining that they will in fact take it on, and on what basis, and that's yet to formally come before council for a decision at this stage. So that's will partly answer the question as to why there's nothing in the budget for Bullock Island, because we don't currently have the ability to invest in Bullock Island until council decide that it is formally going to accept responsibility for that part of the island.
My point was that I just didn't want the community to be misled with something that wasn't probably fully in place at this stage, and so that it's clear that you fully know that we are not land managers or committee of management of Bullock Island. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hilly. Our second presentation for tonight is from Float Inc. and we have Andrea Lane in attendance. And just a reminder that you also have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Is this what I'm... Okay, thank you. Thanks for having us here tonight. My intention is to only give a very superficial overview of the work that's gone into the Float project, but it's been a 3-year journey, and I was encouraged to come along and give a bit of insight about that, and hope to form a stronger partnership, I suppose, with council and in developing this project, because we think it's a major asset to the community, and I hope it's a really positive story. When you look at Lake's entrance and the story that Bruce has told, I guess we think Float's something that's really positive and has been a really successful model. The Float project was a small town transformation project funded by Creative Victoria and managed by Regional Arts Victoria. At Lake Tyers Beach, we applied for $350,000 to transform our community with the idea of a floating art studio. And this is the result of that project, the floating art studio. As a little bit of recap, I guess I wanted to highlight that Float hasn't come out of nowhere. We've been doing community arts for a long time, probably the last 10, 15 years, going way back to the Fruit Project. The Fruit Project started probably when I came to East Gippsland, really 20 years ago, and Dr. Elizabeth Blakewell introduced me to the joys of fruit bottling, and I was immediately taken by the the local knowledge that we had in our own backyards that was really being under-acknowledged in our communities. That experience of bottling fruit led to fruit breakfasts, which really meant that we created conversations through gathering people around what we could do amongst ourselves, really with no funding, just really with a belief that we all enjoyed each other's company and that creative thoughts would flow from those conversations. A small team of us embarked on a series of fruit breakfasts across all of East Gippsland. This particular journey was funded by the Australia Council with a very small development grant way back then. And really, we just served apple fritters to all these communities and shared them. And I would say that the community that we established in that process is really what continues to support us to this day. We partnered with local projects like the Bruthen Orange Fair. We just became an added attraction to what those communities were already doing. So we were never competing for their attention, we were just really trying to support what they were doing as an act of generosity. As you can see, we travelled to Cassilis, Swifts Creek, Nicholson, Tubbut, Goongerah, and as I say, that really is our network that continues today. From there, we got funding to build a fruit cart, which became our fairly iconic vehicle from which we could serve fruit breakfast. That's Gary Belsky, who's a Tambo Upper resident. He's a blacksmith and a metal fabricator. We took the fruit cart down to Northcote and we were on the 7:30 report serving the breakfast and telling the story of the unique experience that you can have in East Gippsland once you get to know the people. We developed a fruit brand. We were very lucky to meet Jess John along the way. I think she was 18 or 19 at the time. She had a great eye for branding and became the person that drove our fruit brand, which really has attracted a lot of attention locally, but really across the state. And the idea of the word fruit, if that hasn't become obvious, is really that we were talking about fruit, but we were developing a journey to say that we could curate an experience in East Gippsland. We don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the galleries, but we do have the people and the goodwill and the generosity to be an amazing experience that as a traveller I look for when I travel, and I guess that's what we're discovering. That evolved into an event called Fruitville, generally at Nicholson River Winery, that became a growing event that I see now expanding in things like the Feral Festival that was at Bruthen last week and the Forage Feast that happened at Bruthen a couple of weeks ago. We were really lucky that Costa happened to love us because we were talking his language, and that really changed people's opinion of us as a community arts event that really had some gravitas, you know, that he became a fantastic ambassador for what we were doing. That was us at Nungurna with Dora Stockhausen and Marcus Foley at their gallery in Nungurna. We went on to create feasts and to create and to discover beautiful photographers like Claire River. I have to say, all of our events have been documented by Claire. She does it often for nothing. We try to pay her when we can, but she's just been a fantastic recorder of all the things that we've been doing. We progressed to establishing a artist-made travel bureau in Docklands because we became part of the Renew Docklands project. We applied to have a space there, which we were able to have for $20 a week, and we really told the Gippsland story. We inhabited that for about 12 months, and I think it's still a good idea that Regional Arts Victoria should perhaps be pursuing, because people came and discovered things they didn't know about this region through us occupying that space and serving a lot of fruit breakfast there. We started curating local tours, and they've always been really small scale. We see ourselves as piloting these things. We were never in it to make a mountain of money out of things, but just to highlight the things that people didn't know were here. So of course, Swifts Creek and say Cassilis, we've established a really great partnership with up at Rob Logie's studio there for that one. From there, of course, we didn't establish Foundry, but I'd have to say that we contributed to its establishment. It's been running for 3 years now as a shop in Bairnsdale that you probably all know. Jess John's the leader of that as well. They turned over $100,000 this year as an arts collective, putting money in the pocket of local artists, and is an amazing success story. We applied for incubator funding that we partnered with Rural Councils Victoria. I think they gave us about $10,000. We did so much with it, it's unbelievable. We were offered this space by Claire Leese and Joe Moulton there, and negotiated that so that we had a space that we learned how to put on speakeasies and events and have musicians there. And again, it's that beautiful branding by Jess and her crew that actually presented this much younger, vibrant image of East Gippsland that we think was totally different to what anyone had thought of East Gippsland before. We ran a design competition. Oh, actually, Neil Smith and I participated in the Crunch program, which was run by the social traders to develop a business plan for a social enterprise around glamping in East Gippsland. And part of that was looking for a campster, I don't know what to call it, tent that could operate in the area that we'd focused on, which was the Point Hicks area, to say, how do we actually create these beautiful spaces for people to come glamping in Far East Gippsland? The winner of that competition, which we offered a $5,000 prize for, attracted architects from all around the world submitting their designs. They paid to enter, which was really nice, because paying to enter meant that we could actually offer a $5,000 prize for the winning design, which we then crowdfunded to build the prototype of. As a result, we built the fruit pod, which I have to say, thanks to Giant Grass, who won the design competition, went viral and still travels the world as a beautiful example of what communities can build when they put their minds to it. So I guess that's just to say, you know, I've not even touched on the float story yet, but I suppose I just wanted to say we're not making this up, we're not imagining things, we do actually have some great outcomes. We went on to apply for the float grant, which to build on Lake Tyers. We were successful. We designed it. That's the design team there: Rory Balding, Catherine Larkins, Lenny Hayes, Francis Harrison, Cameron Robbins and Josephine Jacoby, with the model of the float way back when. And while the build was happening, we were creating an experience at the tavern which we call Tavern Tuesday, which continues today. We meet every Tuesday at the tavern, and we probably have around 50 participants who come each week. Along the way, we established what we called a communiversity, because we feel there's just so much knowledge in the local community that's untapped. Catherine Larkin's connections with the Indigenous community was obviously crucial in forming these kind of partnerships. Elaine Terrick is one of the best basket weavers in the region. Frank Flynn is a botanist. Sarah Carlisle with Venture Out means we've established a kayak club so that we're actually on the lake, we're not just looking at it from afar. We engage people in learning and sharing skills and really celebrating that. Josephine Jacoby built a bee farm, art camp, science camp, philosophy camp, which we run at various times to bring people to come and talk around what float can be. I won't go into the communiversity details, but basically to say it's a curriculum for a campus built by the community. It's not locked in any way, it's been the outcome of what we talk about at Tavern Tuesday. All this time the boat was being built on Lake Tyers at Fisherman's Landing, thanks to the support of the Shire, the Council. Delp, Gippsland Ports were all incredibly helpful in allowing us to do this alongside Fisherman's Landing. It was a major exercise. And we also delivered a fantastic corroboree, again thanks to Catherine Larkins, who has such great relationships, that we were able to celebrate the launch of the vessel with a blessing of the vessel from Auntie Phyllis and the community. We also ran an almanac exhibition out at Lake Tyers House, and if you don't know Lake Tyers House, you know it's a very secret, fantastic destination that we were really privileged to be able to install an exhibition on the other side of Lake Tyers House. We walked there from the shores opposite the tavern. We had a smoking ceremony and we had an exhibition installed in the house there. And it was a fantastic event that we're going to do again in February next year. And of course we were rapt to have Glawak there with Grattan leading the walk as well. So I'll kind of skip over these a little bit, but just basically to say the community are making art, they're loving what we're doing behind the scenes while the vessel's being built. We're becoming a better community to welcome the artists who'll come and reside on the float vessel. Sandy Boswell, of course, OH&S guru, Rick Jacoby. We did eventually run out of money on the boat construction. It wasn't a very expensive business. And at that point, the communiversity really kicked in because all the people that we'd brought along on the journey stepped up and finished the boat. So we had, retired builders, electricians, plumbers, Gippsland Solar, who donated the solar system for the boat. We did put in some money. We ran an art auction to raise the rest of the money, but Gippsland Solar made a considerable donation to that. Obviously, we had lots of tradesmen and people, and Joe was there, and Gippsland Solar. Skipper Pete's been invaluable to our journey, of course, because without him, we would often struggle to get from the boat to the shore and all those other places, and certainly backing up kayak tours and things. We had a welcome to country at Fisherman's Landing when we launched the vessel, and that's how it's looking now. So that's my recap on a very short history of float. We're now ready to launch. We've got a program for the next 12 months about the artists who will be coming on board. The ABC came to the launch and produced a beautiful video of the vessel and what we were anticipating to happen for the next 20 years, because we do expect it to be there for at least that long. As a result of that rotation on ABC News on Christmas Day and Boxing Day, we got 200 expressions of interest. We've got 25 artists now lined up to be installed as artists in residence. We're in conversation with them. It's a little bit organic as we learn the process. There's a lot to learn about hosting artists and understanding how to program that and their needs, but everyone's focused around the lake, the environment, their love of the space. And so we're looking forward to the next 12 months of that program. And I suppose what prompted this presentation was really that although we love the vessel, we actually think it's only the beginning of the story. We hope that what we've produced is a good model of community engagement in the arts, and that we're producing great outcomes from that, and that we can spread that right across the Gippsland Lakes, I suppose, is what we met with Kate and Anthony a couple of weeks ago to say, we actually think we can do this in lots of places. Along this journey we've heard of underused spaces, places that only get used occasionally. They're iconic destinations like Lake Tyers House, like Bunga Haven, like the community space on Rigby Island, I think. Rotima, places that we're just hearing about that just using this model. Some people are prepared to donate their spaces to the business model so that we can make sure as a social enterprise that we can remain viable. But I also think there's just a plain business model that people will just pay to come and have these kind of experiences in East Gippsland. And that what we're looking for is something that takes advantage of our natural assets, but adds that creative touch that actually says people want to come more for experiences than just seeing and actually taking part in it. So I guess that's kind of where we're at the moment, and I have to say we're getting a lot of, it seems to be something in the zeitgeist, I suppose, that suddenly I've received lots of proposals from other arts organisations around the state saying they're thinking the same thing. They want us to be part of this network that's offering artistic excellence and relevance that tells people what a unique experience you have in regional communities, and that the arts really helps make that happen. How's that?
Thanks, Andrea. That was absolutely fantastic to hear of all the fantastic initiatives that you've created with that group. So congratulations. Are there any questions from the councillors? No?
Self-explanatory, was it?
Can I just say congratulations? I think it's a really fantastic concept, and I do liken it to the starting and the beginning of the men's sheds projects. And I'm thinking, with that in mind, that actually went worldwide. So I'm not sure whether this is happening elsewhere, but it may be, and I'm only suggesting this, it may be ideal to patent the base of this at this stage so that there is a base concept to it, because when I spoke with the people that started the men's sheds back in, because it was originally started in Orbost, they wished they had have patented it back in those days, and the guy that started it actually took it around the world and has made a living from it. So I'm only throwing it out there with regards to our economic development officers here. It would be worthwhile them talking to you and putting you in that space to protect what you've actually grown, because it's an awesome concept and it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. And I guess it's really an invitation to anyone who wants to find out more to come and talk more
Beautiful.
to us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrea. Item 1.8, public question time, Mr. CEO.
Madam Mayor, we have no questions.
Item 1.9, record of assemblies of councillors report for April and May 2019.
Happy to move that.
Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Thanks, Councillor Peltz. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 1.10, petitions. Miss Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The petition that is being tabled tonight was lodged with the Deputy Mayor, Councillor John White, on the 6th of May by Mr Alan Kenneberry. What the petition is seeking was for, and I'm quoting, for Council to stop the 12.09% rate increase on agricultural land for the rating year 2019 to 2020, and to reduce council rates to significantly below the rating year the 1st of July 2018 to 30th of June 2019 levels because of historically falling agricultural land values. Since the petition was lodged, Council released its revised draft budget, which essentially reduced the anticipated 12.09% rate increase back to 2.45%. So we contacted Mr Kenneberry and asked whether he would still like his petition to go forward. He indicated that yes, he would, so it's tabled here tonight. And in addition, on the 1st of June, Mr Kenneberry delivered a second petition to Councillor White, which unfortunately was received too late to be included in the agenda. The petition is essentially the same and is really just Mr Kenneberry noting that the plea remains the same, placing more emphasis on the request that rates be lowered from 2019 levels, and that secondary petition was accompanied by approximately 170 signatures. So that information is tabled for you tonight. There's really no decision to be made. That will be at the time the draft budget is considered. So Mr Kenneberry's petition will be considered along with all other submissions received in relation to the draft budget. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Is the 12%, is that or roundabout, whatever it is, 12 point something, does that apply to the commercial establishments and residential establishments? Does it apply generally, or is it only just to farming land where this valuation has been increased by that seemingly enormous amount?
The 12.09% was represented in the first draft budget. Council released a revised draft budget that reduced that amount to 2.5% increase, which is in the same vicinity as the rate for both the commercial and residential rating categories.
How can the Shire, it's my understanding that the state government has taken over the valuation. Well, how can the Shire suddenly drop the valuations when we didn't put them on in the first place?
The 12.09% refers to the increase in rating rather than the increase in valuations.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, but it seems very complicated to me to think that we've got, it sort of puts us in double jeopardy, doesn't it? You know, where we can decide to do something that the state says basically that we can't. Thank you.
If you're referring to the rates cap, councillor, which is where the state government mandates that the rates can only increase a certain percentage. Is that what you're referring to?
Referring to that, yeah, as well, that it seems an enormous drop to bring it down from 12.09 to 2 point whatever. Those figures don't seem to register properly when you look at your actual rate notice. It doesn't seem to be something like a 10% drop in the rates that you're paying.
The rate notice, of course, haven't issued, so that's a hypothetical. But I think the rates cap, which restricts the percentage amount that rates can be increased in a year, is an average rate increase. So depending on the ebb of flow of valuations and depending on council's decisions through its rating strategy in terms of the 3 rating categories we have, will depend on whether individual ratepayers experience an increase, a decrease, or the rates stay the same. And you're quite right, councillor, I'm afraid it is quite a complicated equation.
Any further questions?
Recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Tino. Thanks, Councillor Tui. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 2, notices of motion and or rescission. Mr CEO.
Nil have been received, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 3, deferred business. Mr CEO.
There is no deferred business, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 4, councillor reports. Councillor Buckley.
Better switch this on. I attended the celebrations if you'd call them celebrations, last Friday at the West End School with the reconciliation there, and it went over quite well. And Joe's probably got that in his report, so I'll leave that to you, Joe. And he was the other councillor that was there. And the one that interested me greatly is we had a committee meeting to form a new committee for the Brunambra Hall, would you believe? And we were a bit short on numbers, so we got the Mrs. Shop. We were holding the meeting in her shop, so we put her on the committee as well, and we managed to get 4. And anyway, we just had a little bit of a tiny history stuff. Way back in the century before last, the Victorian state government gave the hall people £180 and 50 books to start a library, and by the 1886 it got to 350 books, and it was a free library open between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. And our very old man on our committee now, Barney Vince Pender, he says, yeah, it was a free library, all right, because all the books disappeared. And this was the century before last. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Ellis.
It's always difficult to follow Councillor Buckley and come back on. So my report won't be as colourful, Madam Mayor. Just want to welcome all the members of the community here tonight to our meeting here in Lakes Entrance. It's good to have the regional meetings as a permanent fixture on our calendar. It's appropriate that I mention I attended Bruce's town hall meeting and the Mechanics Hall here in Lakes. It was most capably organised by the executive of Bruce's group, leader, and it's wonderful. I've been getting feedback on how this new community group's moving along, and to hear that they've got in excess of 435 members is a genuine achievement, and Bruce is to be congratulated. While staying on topic, it's pleasing to revisit the sites of the major projects Council's working on around Lakes Entrance today, and to remind Council of the amount of work that we actually do in this town. The discussion and viewing of the opportunities at Jemmy's Point as a destination point was a genuine highlight today, to be up there and look at the potential there. I cannot tell you how pleased I was when I heard our local MP Darren state that he was quite amenable to looking at both the Jemmy's Point site and the Kalimni Hill site. And as councillors do know, council officers have been undertaking exploratory work on that particular project. I'm just going through, trying to not keep it all lakes focused. I've also been meeting with other members of the Lakes Entrance community, which I should mention because Mr Hurley raised one issue, and that was the access to strategic plans relating to Lakes Entrance. As a result of conversations that I've had with members of the community, once again, through the Office of the Chief Executive Officer, I've been able to arrange for copies of those plans to be available for public viewing at the Lakes Entrance Library, and they are now out there and available. They were previously made available in actions I took some years ago, so it's good to see that they're now re-available. Continuing on today, I thought that our meeting with the board and the new chair of LEFCOL, Bruce Hammond, was particularly a particularly interesting and inspiring conversation. The ideas that they have for the future of the Lakes Entrance Fishermen's Co-op is forward viewing, and I look forward to council assisting where we can the development of that particular project. I think I have a series of meetings that I've attended over the last month or two, and I'll submit those in my written report. I think I should just make mention of attending at the Lake Tyers Waterwheel Hotel last week to celebrate National Volunteers Week, and I was honoured to be able to hand out awards of recognition to a large number of volunteers, and those in particular who provide volunteer services at our visitor information centres across the Shire. Interestingly, I attended the Future Local Government workshops in Melbourne last week, and what we've experienced tonight is part of what the future of local government is presenting, not only here in this country, but in the UK and other members of the Empire, as they say, British Commonwealth. And finally, whilst Councillor Ratino and Councillor Buckley were celebrating NAIDOC Week at West Benchdale Primary, I had the honour to be accompanied with the Mayor and Councillor Peltz at the launch of the East Gippsland Business Awards. It's an awards night that deserves the highest level of support it possibly can, and I'll leave it to the Mayor to promote that in her words, so I'll leave it at that for this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been an incredibly busy month with a lot of kilometres travelled, but I'll skip over the events and then I'd like to come back to a couple of special events that I attended. So I went to Cape Shank to the Parks and Leisure Australia Awards Nights early in the month, then also our Gippsland Sports Academy Annual Awards Night down in Tarrolgan. Then later this month we adjourned council meeting during the afternoon to attend the rebranding of TAFE, which was a good gathering, and it was good that we could show our support as a council to that body. Then there was the Paynesville Fire Brigade's Annual Awards Night and Dinner. Also a meeting with CMA CEO Graham Deere, then chaired a Livestock Exchange Committee meeting, Shire Emergency Management meeting, and then the MAV Emergency Management last Friday. Now, with our award for at the Parks and Leisure Australia, which was at Cape Shank, it was great to go there to be presented with an award that the Shire has won for their detail and planning for our new sports precinct. So that award was for Northern Tasmania and Victoria combined, and East Gippsland has won that award, and it also puts us in a position now to be put forward for the national award coming up later in the year. So hopefully we can proceed and do well there. The Gippsland Sports Academy annual awards is to do with local young sports who are excelling, and there was quite a good representation of East Gippsland Shire young people there that were doing very well in their chosen sports. But I'd like to just to note that Dave Jones, whose daughters are accomplished shooters, Dave was given an award for his efforts in supporting the local sports people. So it was good to see that he was recognised for the tireless work he's done, particularly with his daughters. A lot of. Oh, thank you, Councillor Ellis, another Lakes man, so can speak to him tonight from this forum. So that was my month, but it was really great to get out to some of these things where East Gippsland has featured well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Peltz.
No, I'll just forward my report. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I won't bore the gallery this evening while I plug my laptop in. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Rotino.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that, for me, is why I became a councillor and got involved with our communities. I went to a Workways Change the Story, and Workways have teamed up with COACT Employment, and they screened at the Bairnsdale Sun Cinema a series of Change the Story. It's a nationwide storytelling project celebrating ability and showing how sustainable, meaningful employment can change lives. Through the 7 short films, the project follows people across Australia who are changing the story around disability employment. It's really a deep look into what navigating the world of work means through the eyes of people with disability. I commend this great initiative by Brian McCormack and in partnering with COACT and opening people's minds as to what is possible and achievable with an open mind towards disability employment services. Disability employment services like Workways locally dedicate resources to give one-on-one support and assist people along their journey to sustainable, meaningful employment and changing lives. Also, would like to urge my colleagues to maybe look at ABC Employable Me, which is a series about the same sort of thing, and also gives you an insight into the great work that disability employment services provide in our community in changing lives, even if it's one life at a time. That sort of augured well into the National Volunteer Week, and I attended the breakfast. Councillor Ellis attended the event down here, but this year's national theme was Making the World of Difference, and it was a great opportunity to celebrate volunteerism across East Gippsland. If you think about volunteers and the important role they play in health and well-being of us all, consider where we would be without them. Who'd be delivering and serving Meals on Wheels to those in need, helping children read at school, fundraising for hundreds of local, national and international causes, ensuring community sport is accessible to all, and supporting vulnerable, creating art and culture opportunities, operating opportunity shops, mentoring our youth and promoting our region, and the list just goes on and on. So, Madam Mayor, once again, I think on behalf of us all, I'd like to express a very big thank you to all our volunteers across our wonderful community. That sort of finished. The last thing I want to talk about is the Lakes Entrance Surf Lifesaving Club presentation night. They do a really, really good job, and Councillor Ellis has previously been involved there, and the discipline that's shown by the young people within that organisation and the way that they bring young people through it, it was a fantastic presentation again. And the patrolling hours that are done during this busy summer period down here at Lakes Entrance, look, it's just mind-boggling the amount of hours that are put in. And I'd like to thank the President and his team there for the patrol hours which have been recognised through the achievements. And I'd like to also congratulate Club Member of the Year Jamison Chester and Junior Member Bella Hodder for the great work they did in their young leadership, and also recognise Jess Woodward, who was the MC for the night. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Councillor Tui.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Amongst the things I attended over the last month, I must say that the highlight for me, believe it or not, and this did surprise me, I went to the cemetery signage opening. Now, this is the cemetery in Forge Creek Road in Bairnsdale. I've been lucky over the years that I've never been there for any other reason than attending the signage opening, and I was astounded at what the place is and what it looks like. It's a beautiful place. It really is a very peaceful place, and what the organisation has done up there is they've placed 10 signs around the cemetery that speak of important people in our history, which goes back to, I think, the earliest person up there was 1862. Just wonderful to see, and again, along the lines of Councillor Rotino and other councillors, of acknowledging the volunteers in our community, whom we would not do very well without. Volunteerism is alive and well in Bairnsdale. I saw it firsthand. The pride that the people take in what they do up there, amongst all of the other things that people do in our communities, is to be absolutely commended, and that's part of the reason why it was the highlight of my month. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Toohey. I'll just talk about a couple of things drought related. Last month, Council approved an advocacy document looking ahead, which the CEO and I presented in conjunction with Wellington Shire to Agriculture Victoria and the Minister for Agricultural's office, and which basically proposes a three-tier approach to further engage with state and federal governments, and we will continue having these discussions with the relevant ministers and look forward to continuing to support our farmers. Yesterday, we also had the pleasure of having the new Federal Agricultural Minister, Bridget McKenzie, in East Gippsland, and this was her first day of her regional visits in her new role, so we were very lucky to have her here in East Gippsland. She came into Lakes Entrance and had a tour of Left Cole and also Gippsland Jersey, and then onto Lightfoot's Winery and Bulmer Farms, and then onto Sale, where the CEO and I, along with various other stakeholders, had the opportunity to have a roundtable discussion with about all things agriculture. But really, I think she was very impressed with the state of our agricultural industry. Obviously, we're in drought at the moment, but there is certainly lots of great businesses and industries within our region, and we look forward to continuing to promote that. Thank you. Okay, on to office.
Roberts, did you have anything?
No.
No, sorry.
Officer reports 5.1.1, planning permit application 59/2019/P, application for use and development of the land for restricted recreation, gymnasium and car parking to the satisfaction of the responsible authority at 70 Delmahoy Street, Bairnsdale. Miss Reynolds.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, fellow councillors, members of the executive team, staff and members of the public gallery. Thank you for the opportunity to present this matter. This is a planning permit application 59/2019. It's seeking the issue of a planning permit for the use and development for the purposes of a restricted recreation facility, gymnasium at 70 Delmahoy Street, Bairnsdale. As a result of objections received in relation to the matter, a planning consultation meeting was conducted on the 21st of May, wherein the applicant and supporters and the objectors were given opportunity to speak to the matter. Following the planning consultation meeting, further meetings were conducted with the applicant, which resulted in an amendment to the application. Just to be clear, the application was amended to include the construction of a mezzanine, to include the ceiling of the car park, access ways and crossovers, to make corrections to some anomalies in the plans, including door locations, tidal boundaries and the proposed works, It also made a reference to specification of maximum number of patrons on site to 20 at any one time, and it gave further details in relation to the car parking spaces and location. The land is zoned for Industrial 1 purposes, and the use of the land for restricted retail facility is a permissible use in the zone. And the recommendation before you tonight, councillors, is to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit, and we're proposing 13 conditions. The merits, the planning merits before you, is that we believe that the use is able to operate in a manner which mitigates the amenity impacts that have been raised, subject to the imposition of the 13 planning permit conditions. We also say that there's an appropriate amount of parking available both on site and within the vicinity of the land. Just to recap the key issues, there were 4 thematic issues relating to noise, traffic, parking, dust, and impact to health and wellbeing. I take you to Appendix 1, which proposes 13 conditions. More specifically, Condition 1 relates to a series of amended plans. These are details that would normally come as part of the planning permit application. In this instance, we're proposing that a series of amended plans come as part of the approval of the application. You will note also the inclusion of Condition 3, which requires the provision of an acoustic barrier, refers to the closing of the roller door during class times to minimise sound and echo. You'll also notice the imposition of a 20 patron on any one time, and hours of operation. It's proposed that the planning permit be issued with a commencement time of 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 12 on a Saturday, and 9:30 to 12 on a Sunday. It's noted that these hours of operation, together with the agreement with respect to the patron numbers and the amendment plans, have been discussed and agreed with the applicant. I'll also just draw your attention to Condition 9 that talks about some landscaping and some requirements with respect to landscaping on the eastern boundary. With respect, we request that the recommendation before you is to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit.
Thanks, Ms Reynolds. Questions from the councillors? Councillor Rotino.
Thank you. Ms Reynolds, in coming together with the conditions on this planning permit, my understanding is both the applicant and the objectors were given an opportunity to feed into that process. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Rotino, for your question. Subsequent to the planning consultation meeting, another meeting was occurred with Manager Statutory Services and the Planning Officer project managing this file the next day with the applicant and the applicant's advocate, wherein the conditions were discussed in the main, being the hours of operation, the amended plans, the ceiling of the car park, maximum numbers of patrons. So these were discussed and agreed at this meeting the following day, yes. In the balance of the conditions, some of them are standard conditions which you would see in this type of development.
Councillor Rotino.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, could I just have a follow-up one to that answer? So in relation to particularly into the operating hours, theoretically, if the business establishes and gets going, and is there an opportunity for those hours to be modified in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Rotino. An application is able to be made to amend planning permit conditions as part of any planning permit application. Yes, application can be made into the future to amend planning permit conditions pertaining to the operation of the use on the site.
Councillor Ellis.
Just two simple questions to you, Ms Weir. One is, was the applicant represented by a planning expert so as to able to interpret the conditions that you outlined to the applicant clearly to the applicant?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. As I said, Manager Statutory Services and the Planning Officer is available, and I understand the applicant himself was present at the meeting, as was the planning advocate, and at the meeting to discuss specifically those conditions that followed from the planning consultation meeting. So yes, the planning advocate was present.
Mr. Hollow.
Just in addition to my colleague's answer there, Councillor Ellis, and thank you for your question. The matters that we raised, discussed, we spoke about relocation of car parking spaces, operating times, patron numbers, the acoustic treatments along the eastern boundary, and even some drainage matters. Obviously, we weren't going to give them absolute detail of the conditions because that's up to my officer to draft up. But as a planning consultant, this consultant is well experienced and would have expected those type of conditions to fall out and explained that to her client when we were in the meeting.
I just may have, following up on Councillor Rottino's question and its second question, that is on process and what have you. If council was to approve an application this evening and it was found by perhaps the objectors to this particular thing that the conditions the council have approved were unbearable, do they have a right to appeal against the decision of council?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. In the event following a decision tonight, appeal rights are open to both parties. So there's appeal rights for the objector against the recommendation of a notice decision to grant a planning permit to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, as is an ability for the applicant to appeal particular conditions. Both are to VCAT under different sections of the Act, but they're the rights under the legislation.
Councillor Peltz.
Thank you. Given the fact that this property where the activity is going to be occurring is zoned industrial, 6:30 is not an unreasonable time for works or for businesses to start in that area, given the fact that it's industrial. So the fact that it's a house next door, is that also zoned industrial or not a domestic dwelling?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Peltz. The existing dwelling is also zoned Industrial 1 purposes, but has been there for many, many years, and as a result, it has and enjoys existing use rights to be there as a dwelling. We consider, on balance, the imposition of a condition to commence at 6:30 is reasonable and having regard for the amenity issues associated with that dwelling.
I just have a follow-up question, if I may. What other businesses along that strip or in the industrial area actually has time frames or start-up time obligations against it? It's against its operation times.
Councillor Peltz, I'm unable to answer the specifics of that question pertaining to the existing uses and whether existing planning permits implement hours of operation.
It's just that I'm curious that you'd actually put a restriction time upon them on the grounds that you're actually restricting trade should it want to start half an hour earlier or not. So I'm just curious, that's all.
This is a decision that we are recommending to you on the basis of the issues raised and the two land uses coexisting together. As officers, we consider it's reasonable that the 6:30 a.m. be imposed as part of the operations, given the specific details relating to this use.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This isn't so much of a question as a comment on the large number and very detailed conditions that are put forward in the recommendation, with sound deadening, landscaping, and a number of other, like relocating the doors, restricting the use of amplified sound systems. I'm cautious that a large proportion of the people that attend this facility in its existing place for them 6:30 is too late. The sessions go, I think go for about 45 minutes. So as the speakers in support of the project at the planning consultation meeting last week stated that many of them would not be able to attend these sessions, and I appreciate that the applicant could put in an application to amend the hours in the future if it was to be appropriate, but I'm cautious that the business may not be able to succeed, especially with the considerable outlay of requirements put forward in the conditions. They definitely don't sound cheap. So coming from my point of view, I would like to see. I'm not sure if there's any support, but to have the start time condition brought back to the original request of 5:50, considering the other conditions that are recommended.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. The applicant has agreed to the time start of 6:30 a.m. The applicant has agreed to that condition.
I believe we received an email from him today or yesterday asking that the times be changed. Is that correct? Number of other attendees also spoke around that as well.
Councillor Roberts, I understand there have been further submissions around the commencement time. My understanding of our position is that we believe the imposition of 6:30 a.m. is reasonable, having regard for the amenity issues as raised. I do acknowledge there have been further written submissions received in relation to this specific element. Our town planning position to you tonight is that the 6:30 a.m. is reasonable, having regard for the issues.
Councillor Ellis.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Ms. Weir, I'm raising this question based on the concerns of Councillor Roberts and leading on from the response you gave to Councillor Rottino and my earlier question, and that is that if Council makes a decision, let's say, to make it, amends the recommendation to allow an earlier start, and 3 months down the track, the neighbour finds that the noise coming at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, let's use that, seeing I'm looking at the clock there, is a thump, 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 and it's disturbing her amenity, her ability to lead a peaceful life. Does that person have the right to object and ask for a review of the decision of council?
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. If we made a decision tonight to alter the hours of operation and a planning permit was to issue, the objector does not have the ability to challenge those opening hours once a permit is issued. So the only time they would get an opportunity to challenge any conditions is during the period of the notice period, from the notice of the grant of notice of decision to grant a permit to the permit, which is a 28-day period.
If I may, Madam Mayor, just to conclude this train of discussion going through, so if we were to adopt the recommendation before council this evening at a 6:30 start, and 3 months down the track, the neighbour and the business operator get together and acknowledge or agree that there is no negative impact upon her amenity, the business proprietor can then make a further application to amend his trading hours. Is that how I interpret it.
That's correct, councillor, and just as a matter of procedural correctness here, and I just want to be clear, is I'm going through some of the paperwork and there was an application to amend the permit on the 10th of May, and that application noted, as I'm just trying to scroll through my works here, it is proposed to reduce the hours of operation with a start time no earlier than 6:10. The proposed hours are 5:50 a.m. open for a 6:10 start of the class. So I think that we would end up in a procedural problem if council was to seek to have opening hours any different than 6:10 from a procedural process. And I think the concern of the applicant in how they've placed their commentary is that the opening hours that we've stipulated is only when that use is operating. It does not mean that the owner of the property or staff can get there earlier, they can set up. Indeed, the end of an evening, if they've got book work to do or anything like that, they can stay back and do that. It's only when the use is operating as a gymnasium that it has to operate within those hours of operation.
Councillor Peltz.
Look, I'm actually on our council website, and our own facility, the Bark, actually schedules timetables for exercise classes at 6:15 a.m. So I'm sort of questionable as to whether fellow councillors would be up to an amendment for the time to start at 6:15 instead of 6:30, given the fact it's competitive and the fact that we've received mail saying that they couldn't, these people utilising this facility would not be able to start at a 6:30. It would make them too late for their daily schedules. And we are talking daily schedules here about how people time manage themselves and their exercise classes. And I think it's unfair of us to burden these people that are in private enterprise and having a go in a business to put a restriction of 6:30 on when we actually start our own classes at 6:15. And I would move to make the amendment only to the recommendation, keep the recommendation the same other than just changing the start time to 6:15 from 6:30. Councillors, over to you.
Councillor White had a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before we get into amendments, etc., I wanted to ask officers if the planning is approved and then later the applicant makes a request for an alteration to some of these conditions, does it then be handled by yourself as staff, or does it have to go back out to for objections, and then would it come back to council for the decision?
Thank you, Councillor White. An application to amend the hours in this circumstances, we would consult. We have to make a judgment about the impact, and in this case we are cognizant, we know that has been an issue being raised as part of the primary planning application. We would seek notice of the planning permit, or to amend the planning permit. As far as procedure goes, it would be a matter, Mr. Hollow, may I just refer to the delegation, the question?
So, councillors, as my officer has pointed out, an application to amend a planning permit can come forward. It would be considered as to whether it needs to be advertised. Should we feel that there might be some material detriment, we would advertise, and depending on the level of objections involved and or whether councillors would wish to call the matter into the chamber, the matter could either be dealt with under delegation and or by council. So if there was more than 9 objections and or it was called in, council would have to make that decision.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a follow-up on what Councillor Pell's just said regarding moving an amendment to change the times. To you, Mr. Hollow, were you saying that the original application was for 6:10, so to keep it, if an amendment was to be considered, it would probably be preferred from a procedural point of view to make it 6:10, is that correct?
Thanks, councillor. Yeah, the application was amended as it was being processed through council. The application reads, it is proposed to reduce the hours of operation with a start time no earlier than 6:10 or 6:10 a.m. The proposed hours are 5:50 a.m. open for a 6:10 a.m. start of class to 7:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. So I think from a procedural basis, should you wish to move a motion and that was carried and it was later, then if it was 6:10 or later than 6:10, I think we wouldn't have that procedural difficulty.
Question, Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This probably may go to Ms Bennett. I'm just wondering, because procedure-wise, we're talking about this around the table with the applicant sitting and his advisor sitting in the gallery. Are they allowed to actually speak to what we're talking about, to say yes or no as to what we're planning?
Council would need to suspend standing orders to allow that to occur.
May I also suggest that isn't this the role of council to make decisions at this point?
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Ms Bennett, would you mind also just from a procedural point of view explain the circumstances around moving an amendment to a recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, and it is a technicality, but councillors are not actually able to amend an officer recommendation. What you can do is move a completely fresh motion that uses exactly the same wording as that of officers, but substituting whatever it is you wish to change. But yes, an officer recommendation cannot be changed. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Perhaps I might be able to help council here. I asked Madam Mayor that this meeting be adjourned for 5 minutes to allow councillors to discuss the proposition of moving a motion based on the advice of Ms Bennett.
Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor White. All those in favour? Okay. Meeting is adjourned for 5 minutes.